The trading hub of Celestine Outpost buzzed with activity as merchants from 100 worlds exchanged goods and gossip. Among the glittering storefronts and busy walkways, a small figure huddled against the cold metal wall near the power distribution center. Kaida pulled her tattered cloak tighter around her shoulders, trying to make herself invisible to the passing crowds. Her scales, which should have gleamed like polished emeralds, had faded to a sickly gray-green. The once proud horns that curved back from her temples were cracked and dull. She was 18 standard years old, though malnutrition had left her looking much younger. Her dragon kind were known across the galaxy as fierce warriors and skilled merchants, but Kaida possessed neither fire breath nor the telepathic abilities that marked her species as exceptional. She had been born wrong. Deficient. Useless. The Jade Flight had abandoned her here 9 months ago, her own mother leading the ceremony of severance. Kaida still remembered the words spoken in their ancient tongue, words that declared her dead to the clan. They had left her with nothing, not even the family crest that every dragon carried. In their eyes, she had ceased to exist. Now she survived on scraps and charity, though charity was rare on Celestine. The station attracted traders who valued profit above compassion, and a broken dragon inspired more contempt than pity. Most species viewed dragon kind as arrogant and powerful. Seeing one reduced to begging confirmed their prejudices rather than stirring their mercy. Kaida's stomach cramped with hunger. She had not eaten in 3 days, having been chased away from the disposal areas by security drones. The station authorities had grown tired of her presence, though they had not yet gone so far as to forcibly remove her. As long as she stayed in the lower sections and caused no trouble, they pretended she did not exist. A group of Valorian merchants passed by, their crystalline bodies refracting the station lights into rainbow patterns. One of them noticed Kaida and made a sound of disgust, a high-pitched chime that translated to contempt in any language. His companion responded with laughter, and they deliberately stepped closer to splash her with the condensation from their environmental suits. Kaida pressed herself harder against the wall, her eyes fixed on the ground. She had learned not to react to such provocations. Any response would only invite worse treatment. The crowd shifted as a transport arrived from one of the docking bays. Fresh travelers poured into the trading hub, their faces bright with the prospect of commerce and adventure. Kaida watched them with hollow eyes, remembering a time when she too had walked through stations with purpose and dignity. That life felt like it belonged to someone else now. A vendor near the center of the hub was grilling something that smelled like spiced meat. The aroma drifted through the recycled air and made Kaida's mouth water. She knew better than to approach during peak hours, but desperation made her foolish. She pushed herself upright, her legs trembling from weakness, and moved toward the stall. She had barely taken 3 steps when the vendor spotted her. His multiple eyes widened in recognition, and his voice boomed across the hub. "Not you again. I told you last time, no beggars near my stall. You're driving away customers." Several heads turned to look. Kaida felt the weight of their stares, the mixture of curiosity and revulsion that always followed her. A tall insectoid being clicked its mandibles in amusement. A dragon reduced to begging. How the mighty have fallen. "Not much of a dragon, is she?" another voice chimed in. "I heard her kind cast her out for being defective. Can't even breathe fire." The laughter that followed felt like physical blows. Kaida retreated, her vision blurring at the edges. She made it back to her spot near the power center before her legs gave out. She collapsed against the wall, sliding down until she sat curled on the cold floor. The warmth from the nearby conduits did nothing to touch the ice that had settled in her chest. People continued to pass, their lives carrying on as if she were just another piece of station debris. Kaida closed her eyes and tried to remember what food tasted like. Real food, not the moldy scraps she sometimes found in the disposal units. Her mind conjured images of the feasts her clan used to hold, tables laden with delicacies from a dozen worlds. She had taken such abundance for granted then, never imagining she would one day be grateful for a piece of stale bread. Time passed in a haze of hunger and cold. Kaida drifted in and out of consciousness, her body conserving what little energy it had left. She was vaguely aware of the station entering its night cycle, the lights dimming to simulate natural darkness. The crowds thinned as shops closed and traders retired to their quarters. In the relative quiet, Kaida heard footsteps approaching. They moved with a measured pace, neither hurrying nor dawdling. She kept her eyes closed, hoping whoever it was would pass by without incident. She had no strength left to endure another confrontation. The footsteps stopped directly in front of her. Kaida tensed, preparing for a kick or a harsh command to move along. Instead, she heard the rustle of fabric as someone sat down beside her on the cold floor. "Rough day?" a voice asked quietly. The accent was unfamiliar, the words spoken in standard galactic common but with an inflection she could not place. Kaida opened her eyes slowly and turned her head to find a human sitting next to her. He appeared to be in his mid-30s, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair pulled back in a simple tie. His clothes marked him as a trader, practical and well-worn but clean. Humans were uncommon this far from their home systems, though their reputation had begun to spread through the outer sectors. They were said to be stubborn, resourceful, and oddly sentimental about the strangest things. This particular human held a wrapped package in his hands. As Kaida watched, he carefully opened it to reveal two substantial portions of what looked like fresh protein bars and dried fruit. The sight made her stomach clench painfully. The human divided the food with deliberate care, creating two equal portions. He held one out toward Kaida, his movements slow and non-threatening. "Name's Owen. Owen Fletcher. Figured you might be hungry. Want to share?" Kaida stared at the offered food, her mind struggling to process what was happening. This had to be some kind of trick. People did not simply give away food to strangers, especially not to disgraced dragons that their own families had rejected. "Why?" The word came out as barely a whisper, her voice rough from disuse. Owen shrugged, a gesture that seemed characteristically human in its casualness. "Because you're hungry and I've got food to spare. Seems like a simple enough reason to me." He placed the food on the ground between them when she did not immediately take it, then began eating his own portion at a relaxed pace. Kaida watched him for a long moment, searching for signs of mockery or hidden agenda. She found only patience and a quiet kindness that felt almost alien after months of cruelty and indifference. Her hand shook as she reached for the food. The moment her claws touched it, her carefully maintained control shattered. She ate quickly, barely tasting it, driven by a hunger that had become her only constant companion. When she finished, she looked up to find Owen still eating at a normal pace, not watching her with judgment or disgust. "What's your name?" he asked. "Kaida," she managed to say between breaths. "Well, Kaida, when's the last time you had a proper meal?" Owen asked the question gently, but it still made her flinch. She had to think about it. Days blurred together when survival consumed your every thought. "Maybe 2 weeks. I find scraps sometimes." Owen's expression shifted, something hard entering his eyes that was not directed at her but at the situation itself. He finished his food and carefully folded the wrapping, tucking it into his pocket. Then he looked at her directly, and Kaida saw a determination in his gaze that she did not understand. "I've got a proposition for you," Owen said. "I run a small trading operation, mostly specialized goods between the outer colonies. I could use someone to help with cargo handling and inventory. Job comes with regular meals and a place to sleep. Interested?" Kaida's world tilted, and this time it had nothing to do with hunger or weakness. "I don't understand. You don't know me. You don't know what I can or cannot do. Why would you offer this?" Owen stood and offered her his hand. "Because everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves. And because I've got a feeling you might surprise a lot of people if someone gives you that opportunity. So what do you say?" Want to find out what you're really capable of? Kaida looked at his extended hand for a long moment. Every instinct warned her that this could not be real, that hope was a luxury she could no longer afford. But something in Owen's steady gaze made her want to believe, made her want to take the risk. She placed her thin hand in his and let him pull her to her feet. Her legs wobbled, but Owen's grip remained steady until she found her balance. He smiled at her, the expression reaching his eyes in a way that made something tight in Kaida's chest begin to loosen. "Come on then," Owen said. "Let's get you properly fed and cleaned up. Tomorrow we can talk about the details, but tonight you're going to eat a real meal and sleep in a real bed. Sound good?" Kaida could only nod, afraid that if she tried to speak, she might start crying. She followed Owen through the station, moving from the lower sections into areas she had only glimpsed from a distance. People stared at her as they passed, their whispers following in her wake, but Owen seemed completely unbothered by the attention. For the first time in 9 months, Kaida walked through Celestine Outpost with her head up, following someone who saw her as more than broken debris. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but for tonight, that was enough. Owen's quarters were modest but well-maintained, located in the merchant section of Celestine Outpost where traders who had established regular routes could rent long-term accommodations. Kaida stood in the doorway, suddenly aware of how out of place she looked in her filthy, tattered clothing. "Washrooms through that door," Owen said, gesturing to the left. "Take your time. I'll put together some proper food while you get cleaned up. There should be spare clothes in the storage locker that'll fit you well enough." Kaida moved into the washroom as if in a dream. The space was small but clean, with actual running water and temperature controls. She had been washing in public facilities when she could sneak in, always rushed and always afraid of being caught. This felt impossibly luxurious by comparison. She cleaned herself thoroughly, watching months of accumulated grime and despair wash away down the drain. Her scales began to show hints of their true color beneath the layers of neglect, though they remained dull from prolonged malnutrition. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw someone who almost resembled the dragon she used to be, before the clan's rejection had hollowed her out. The spare clothes Owen had mentioned were standard station wear, simple and functional. They hung loose on her thin frame, but they were whole and clean. Kaida ran her claws carefully over the fabric, marveling at something so basic yet so precious to someone who had nothing. When she emerged, she found Owen had set up a meal on the small table in his main living area. Not rations or protein bars this time, but actual prepared food. Fresh vegetables, cooked grain, and what appeared to be synthesized meat that still smelled better than anything Kaida had encountered in months. "Sit," Owen said, his tone friendly but firm. "And eat slowly this time. Your stomach needs to adjust after going without for so long." Kaida obeyed, lowering herself carefully into the chair. She forced herself to take small bites, even though everything in her screamed to devour it all at once. Owen sat across from her with his own portion, eating at a relaxed pace that made the whole situation feel almost normal. "So," Owen said after a few minutes of comfortable silence, "tell me about yourself. Where are you from originally?" The question was casual, but Kaida felt the weight behind it. She swallowed her current bite and looked down at her plate. "I was born into the Jade Flight. We're one of the traveling dragon clans, moving between systems to trade and maintain our territories. Dragonkind don't settle in one place easily. We need space to fly, even if most of that flying happens between ships rather than through atmosphere." "But you're not with them anymore," Owen said. It was not quite a question, but Kaida heard the invitation to explain. "I was born without the gifts that define our people," Kaida said quietly. "Dragonkind are supposed to breathe fire, to have telepathic links with our clan mates, to possess the strength that makes us formidable. I have none of that. I'm weak by our standards, unable to perform even the most basic demonstrations of power. My family tolerated my existence for years, hoping I would develop late, but eventually they decided I was bringing shame to the clan." She paused, the memory of that final day still sharp enough to cut. 9 months ago, they performed the ritual of severance. In front of the entire clan, my mother declared me nameless and clanless. They left me here on Celestine with nothing and told me I was dead to them. In dragon culture, I no longer exist. Owen's expression remained neutral, but Kaida saw something flicker in his eyes. Understanding, perhaps, or anger on her behalf. That's remarkably cruel, he said simply. It's our way, Kaida replied, though the words tasted bitter. Dragonkind value strength and power above all else. I represent neither. From their perspective, keeping me would have weakened the entire clan. And from your perspective? Owen asked. No one had ever asked her that before. Kaida looked up, meeting his gaze directly for the first time since they had sat down. From my perspective, they threw away someone who loved them and would have done anything to earn their acceptance. They decided I was worthless without ever asking what else I might be capable of. Owen nodded slowly, as if she had confirmed something he had suspected. Well, Kaida, I'm not dragonkind, and I don't measure worth the way your clan does. I need someone reliable, someone willing to work hard, and someone who won't run off the moment things get difficult. Think you can manage that? I can try, Kaida said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Good enough for me, Owen said with a smile. We'll start easy tomorrow. I've got a shipment coming in that needs to be catalogued and stored. Nothing too strenuous while you're still recovering your strength. Once you're back to full health, we'll see about expanding your responsibilities. Sound fair? Kaida nodded, not trusting her voice. The future that had seemed so bleak just hours ago now held the faint possibility of something better. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. They finished their meal in companionable silence. Afterwards, Owen showed her the small but functional sleeping quarters he had set up in one corner of his living space. The bed was narrow but included actual bedding, a luxury Kaida had almost forgotten existed. Get some rest, Owen said. Tomorrow's a new start, and you're going to need your energy. Kaida lay down on the bed, her body sinking into the mattress with a relief so profound it was almost painful. Through the thin walls, she could hear the ambient sounds of the station settling into its night cycle. The hum of life support systems, the distant murmur of voices, the subtle vibration of ships docking and departing. For the first time in 9 months, Kaida fell asleep without fear of being discovered and driven away. She dreamed of flying, her wings strong and steady, carrying her through open skies rather than the confined corridors of stations. In her dream, she was not broken or deficient. She was simply herself, and that was enough. She woke the next morning to the smell of cooking food. Owen was already up, preparing breakfast with the efficiency of someone accustomed to managing on his own. He glanced over when he heard her stirring and offered a warm smile. Morning. Hope you're hungry because I made plenty. They ate together, and Owen outlined his plans for the day. His trading operation was indeed small, consisting primarily of himself and occasionally hired help for larger shipments. He specialized in rare textiles and artistic works from various cultures, items that required careful handling and knowledge of their origins. The trick to this business, Owen explained as they walked toward his storage facility, is understanding what has value beyond mere function. A piece of cloth is just fabric until you know the story behind it. Then it becomes something people will pay a premium to own. The storage facility was located in the merchant quarter, a secure area where traders could store goods between transactions. Owen's space was well organized, with careful labels and climate controls for sensitive items. Kaida stared at the inventory, overwhelmed by the variety. Don't worry, Owen said, reading her expression accurately. I'm not expecting you to memorize everything today. We'll start with the basics. This shipment here needs to be unpacked and checked against the manifest. Take your time and let me know if you have questions. Kaida set to work with methodical care, handling each item as if it were precious. Because to Owen, she realized, they were. This was his livelihood, his passion. He had trusted her with it, a stranger he had found starving on the station floor. The work was not difficult, but it required attention to detail. Kaida found herself enjoying the process, the simple satisfaction of checking each item off the list and ensuring everything was accounted for. Her hands, which had grown clumsy from disuse and starvation, gradually remembered their dexterity. Owen worked nearby on his own tasks, always available if she needed guidance but never hovering or doubting her capability. As the morning progressed into afternoon, Kaida felt something shifting inside her. Purpose, she realized. For the first time since her clan had abandoned her, she had purpose beyond mere survival. They broke for lunch, returning to Owen's quarters for another meal. Kaida was already eating more normally, her body beginning to remember what proper nourishment felt like. Owen watched her with quiet approval. "You did good work today," he said. "Really good. You've got a careful touch, and you pay attention to details. That's going to serve you well in this business." Kaida felt warmth spread through her chest at the praise. "Thank you for this opportunity. I know I haven't proven myself yet, but I will. I promise I'll work hard and not let you down." Owen's expression grew serious. "Kaida, I'm going to tell you something important, and I need you to really hear it. You don't owe me gratitude for basic decency. I'm not doing you some grand favor by treating you like a person deserving of respect and opportunity. That should be the baseline, not the exception. Yes, I expect you to work hard, but that's because I'm paying you and you're earning your keep. This is an employment arrangement, not charity. Understand?" Kaida blinked, thrown off balance by his words. She had spent so long being treated as less than nothing that she had forgotten what normal expectations looked like. "I understand," she said slowly, testing the concept. "You're saying I don't need to be grateful for being treated fairly." "Exactly," Owen confirmed. "You should expect fair treatment. Demand it, even. The fact that your clan failed to provide it doesn't mean you deserve their cruelty. It means they failed you, not the other way around." The word settled over Kaida like a revelation. She had internalized her clan's rejection so completely that she had begun to believe she deserved it. Owen's straightforward rejection of that narrative felt like opening a door she had not known was closed. They returned to the storage facility for the afternoon shift. Kaida worked with renewed energy, her mind turning over everything Owen had said. As evening approached and they finished the day's tasks, Owen locked up the facility with obvious satisfaction. "Good first day," he declared. "Tomorrow we'll start on something a bit more complex. There's a collection of woven pieces from the Meridian colonies that need cataloging. They each tell a story through their patterns, and part of our job is documenting those stories accurately. Think you're up for that?" "Yes," Kaida said without hesitation. "I'd like that very much." As they walked back through the station, Kaida noticed the stares and whispers that still followed her. But this time, they felt different. She was not a starving beggar anymore. She was someone with a job, with purpose, with a future that extended beyond the next scrap of food. The transformation had begun with a simple act of kindness, and Kaida was determined to prove worthy of the chance she had been given. 3 months passed, and Kaida began to understand what it meant to truly live rather than merely survive. The work with Owen's trading company became her anchor, giving structure to days that had once stretched out in endless, desperate monotony. Her body recovered gradually, her scales regaining some of their original luster, though they would never achieve the brilliant shine of a dragon who had grown up with proper nourishment. Owen proved to be a patient teacher, sharing his knowledge of trade, negotiation, and the subtle art of understanding what people truly valued. Kaida discovered she had an aptitude for the work, particularly in handling delicate items and remembering the intricate details of their origins and meanings. Her careful nature, which had been seen as timidity by her clan, became an asset in a profession where attention to detail could make the difference between profit and loss. The Meridian textiles had been her introduction to the deeper aspects of Owen's business. Each woven piece contained patterns that told stories from the weaver's culture, tales of migration, love, loss, and triumph. Kaida spent hours studying them, learning to read the symbolic language embedded in the threads. Owen had been impressed by how quickly she picked up the skill. "You've got a good eye for this," he had told her one afternoon as she carefully photographed a particularly complex piece for their catalog. "Most people just see pretty cloth. You're seeing the story underneath." Now, as Celestine Station entered its morning cycle, Kaida made her way through the merchant quarter toward Owen's storage facility with confidence that would have been unthinkable just months ago. She nodded to vendors who had grown accustomed to her presence, received acknowledgments in return from those who had learned she was not just another piece of station debris but a legitimate merchant in her own right. She reached the facility to find Owen already there, standing with a woman Kaida had not seen before. The stranger wore the distinctive uniform of a station administrator, her bearing marking her as someone who wielded considerable authority within Celestine's governance structure. "Ah, Kaida, perfect timing," Owen said as she approached. "This is Administrator Reeves. She had some questions about our import documentation from last week's shipment." Administrator Reeves turned to study Kaida with sharp, assessing eyes. "You're the dragon who's been working with Merchant Fletcher?" "Yes, Administrator," Kaida replied, keeping her voice steady and professional. "I handle inventory management and authentication services for his acquisitions." "I see," Reeves said, her tone neutral. "And you're familiar with the documentation procedures for goods originating from restricted trade zones?" This was a test, Kaida realized. A way of checking whether Owen was genuinely employing her or simply harboring a charity case. She straightened her spine, meeting the administrator's gaze directly. "All items from restricted zones require certificate of origin, cultural clearance verification, and tariff assessment before they can be moved through standard trade channels. We maintain duplicate records in both physical and digital formats, with authentication seals from the originating station's trade authority. Would you like to review our most recent filings?" Something shifted in Reeves' expression, a flicker of respect replacing the initial skepticism. "That won't be necessary. I can see Merchant Fletcher has trained his assistant well." She turned back to Owen. "Your documentation is in order. Continue as you have been." After Reeves departed, Owen grinned at Kaida. "Well handled. You've come a long way from the frightened girl hiding in the lower sections." Kaida felt a surge of pride but tempered it with practicality. "I had good instruction. And motivation to learn." They worked through the morning on a new acquisition, a collection of sculptures from a deep space mining colony. The pieces were rough and raw, carved from asteroid rock by workers seeking to create beauty in the harsh environment of their daily lives. Each sculpture told a story of isolation, community, and the strange bonds that formed when people lived in such extreme conditions. As Kaida catalogued the pieces, carefully photographing each one from multiple angles, she found herself thinking about stories and what they meant. Her own story had been written by her clan as a tragedy, a cautionary tale about weakness and the importance of maintaining pure bloodlines. But Owen had offered her the chance to write a different narrative, one where her value was measured by her actions rather than the accidents of her birth. Around midday, they received an unexpected visitor. A dragon walked into the storage facility. His scales gleaming with the deep blue-black of deep space, his bearing radiating the confidence of someone who had never questioned his place in the universe. He wore the traditional markings of a trader from one of the great flights, though not Kaida's own former clan. Kaida felt herself freeze, old instincts of fear and shame rising up despite months of growth. She had not faced another dragon since her abandonment. The visitor's eyes passed over Kaida dismissively before focusing on Owen. "I am Tornak of the Midnight Flight. I seek trade discussion with the human merchant Owen Fletcher." "That would be me," Owen said pleasantly, though Kaida noticed the subtle tension in his shoulders. "What can I do for you?" Tornak launched into a pitch about rare minerals his flight had acquired from a newly opened mining operation in the Outer Rim. He spoke with the casual arrogance typical of successful dragon traders, clearly expecting Owen to be impressed by both the goods and the prestige of dealing with dragon kind. Owen listened politely, asked intelligent questions, and eventually nodded. Interesting. I might have clients interested in these materials. If you'll wait a moment, I'll have my associate pull up our client database to check current market interest. He gestured to Kaida, who moved to the workstation where they kept their records. Her hands shook slightly as she pulled up the relevant files, hyper-aware of Tornak's presence behind her. She could feel his gaze on her back, knew the moment he truly registered what she was. That is a dragon, Tornak said, his voice dripping with disdain. You employ a dragon as a servant? I employ Kaida as my business associate and inventory specialist, Owen corrected, his tone still pleasant but with an edge of steel underneath. And she's quite good at her job. Tornak moved closer, studying Kaida with open contempt. I know you, he said slowly. Or rather, I know of you. Kaida of the Shattered Jade Flight. The defective one they cast out. I heard the story when our flight crossed paths with yours last season. They said you brought shame to your entire lineage. Kaida's claws clenched around the edge of the workstation, but she forced herself to keep working, to pull up the client information Owen had requested. She would not give Tornak the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. They said you were fireless, powerless, worthless, Tornak continued, clearly enjoying himself. And here you are, reduced to being a human's assistant. How appropriate. The weakest of dragons serving the weakest of species. That's enough, Owen said, and his voice had gone cold in a way Kaida had never heard before. Tornak of the Midnight Flight, I'm going to give you two choices. You can apologize to my associate for your disrespect and we can continue our discussion in a professional manner, or you can leave my facility immediately and find another merchant to deal with. Which will it be? Tornak stared at Owen in obvious disbelief. You would refuse trade with dragon kind over a defective runt? Your people are even more foolish than I thought. I refuse trade with individuals who disrespect my employees, Owen said flatly. Species has nothing to do with it. Now make your choice. For a long moment, the two stared at each other. Kaida held her breath, waiting to see how this would resolve. She knew Owen's business would benefit from establishing trade relations with the Midnight Flight. They were one of the wealthiest and most influential dragon clans. Turning them away over her would cost him significantly. Finally, Tornak made a disgusted sound and turned toward the door. Keep your human sentimentality. The Midnight Flight does not need merchants who cannot recognize value when they see it. He left in a swirl of expensive robes, his contempt hanging in the air like smoke. Owen watched him go, then turned to Kaida with concern in his eyes. You all right? Kaida realized she was shaking, but not entirely from fear or shame. Anger burned hot in her chest, anger at Tornak's casual cruelty, at her clan's teachings that had convinced her she deserved such treatment, at a culture that measured worth so narrowly that it threw away anyone who did not fit their precise mold. You should not have done that, she said, her voice tight. The Midnight Flight could have been valuable trading partners. I'm not worth losing that opportunity over. Owen crossed the distance between them and placed a hand on her shoulder, waiting until she met his eyes. Listen to me very carefully, Kaida. You are worth exactly that and more. I will never, not ever, accept business from someone who treats my people with that kind of contempt. Not for profit, not for connections, not for anything. You are not an object to be insulted for my financial gain. You're my partner in this business, and partners stand up for each other. The words broke something open inside Kaida, some last desperate piece of her that had been clinging to her clan's definition of her worth. She felt tears burning at the corners of her eyes, a luxury she had not allowed herself since the day of her abandonment. I don't understand humans, she whispered. You give away food to strangers, you defend employees at cost to yourself, you measure value in ways that make no logical sense from a survival perspective. Why? Owen smiled, and it was gentle and honest and completely without judgment. Because we've learned that survival isn't the same as living. And because we believe that how we treat each other, especially when there's no profit in it, defines who we really are. Your clan taught you that power equals worth. My people learned something different. We learned that worth is inherent, and power is just one tool among many. You have worth, Kaida. You always did. Your clan's failure to recognize that is their loss, not yours. Kaida let the tears fall then, quiet and cleansing. Owen waited patiently, his hand steady on her shoulder, offering support without demanding anything in return. When she finally regained her composure, she took a deep breath and straightened her spine. "Thank you," she said simply. "For seeing what I could not see in myself." "Anytime," Owen replied. "Now, how about we close up early today? I think we've earned an afternoon off. There's a new restaurant that opened up in the merchant quarter that supposedly serves excellent food from a dozen different worlds. Want to check it out?" Kaida nodded, feeling lighter than she had in years. As they locked up the facility and headed toward the restaurant, she found herself thinking about wings. Dragonkind prized their ability to fly, saw it as proof of their superiority. But Kaida had learned something her clan never understood. You did not need wings to soar. Sometimes all you needed was someone willing to show you that you had the strength to stand on your own. The story of Kaida the defective dragon was ending. The story of Kaida the merchant, the survivor, the individual who had found her worth despite everything working against her, was just beginning. And she was going to make it a story worth telling.